Okay, so we've been talking about seizing the opportunity, building a business case for content initiatives, and they said yes. Great. How do we get the headcount now to implement this? Selene de la Cruz from Mastercard is going to talk about just that. Welcome, Selene.
Thank you. Let me just start sharing my screen. Okay. So thanks for the introduction, Jack. As Jack said, I'm Selene de la Cruz. I'm a content design manager at Mastercard, and I'm going to talk to you today about how to grow your content team. And before I fully get into it, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge how amazing it is to be here with all these content professionals together in one place. And I think part of the reason that it really feels so amazing is because so many of us still work alone or on very small teams. And I say still on purpose because content as an industry is really having a moment right now, whether you're a content designer or a UX writer or a content strategist. These are all growing fields. However, our representation isn't growing at the same rate. A lot of us are still operating at a minuscule ratio to our counterparts. So I became really interested in this idea of growing a team to see our representation grow as a way of also growing the recognition of the importance of the work that we do. And it's also been a natural interest of mine because growing teams is how I've been able to grow my career. So I did it once, agency side, where I helped to found the content strategy practice for my agency, eventually spreading content strategy to every brand and client that agency held. And I helped to grow a team again when I joined Mastercard as the second content designer, and now have been part of a growing team there. So my viewpoint is really from an agency side and a content design side, so very much experience or product focus, but I think you'll find that these tips and tricks and patterns that I have learned can be applicable to any team, really. So here is kind of my virtuous growth cycle in a nutshell, and underpinning it all is strategic work. And by strategic work, I mean when you are able to align the goals of the work that you're doing with the goals of your organization. Because when you can do that, that's when people will really see your value that you bring to the table. And that's when you're going to get headcount, which of course will lead to you having a bigger team. But it can be hard to kind of break into this cycle of growth when you're operating as a solo practitioner or as a very small team, because you might find yourself just inundated with tactical day-to-day work, not able to have the time and the headspace that comes with having a bigger team to start doing strategic work. So I'm going to talk about how you can kind of get this flywheel for growth spinning and break into this cycle. So there's kind of four main parts. First of all, how are you going to get budget? Because that is all important to getting headcount. How can you show and share and prove your value? And then because I know everyone here is going to get headcount after this talk, what can you start doing today to prepare for growth? And how can you hire strategically? So it's not just a one and done hiring situation, but you're going to hire for continued growth. So jumping into getting budget, the biggest secret to getting budget is really to create your allies, because these are the people who are going to go to bat for you when you're asking for headcount, and who might even dip into their own budgets to help you hire someone for your team. So you'll find as you're working that there are kind of naturally certain people who really get the work that you're doing. These are your allies. You want to acknowledge them, partner with them, and support them where you can, because again, budget can come from anywhere. So this is kind of our content ecosystem of people that we and teams we're partnering with at Mastercard. And one of the places that we found a great ally was with our research team. So they had been testing concept prototypes with content that was frankly written by non-content professionals. And a lot of the feedback they were getting on these concepts was just around confusion, or even pointing to the language and saying, that sounds strange. So we went in and helped their team develop a more clearly articulated value proposition for these concepts, do some like quick win UX and UI writing for them. And they saw that with our help, they were able to get feedback on the concepts themselves. So the kind of feedback that they were looking for. And once they saw the value we brought, they became our advocates. So when we went to have budget conversations with upper management and leadership teams around converting a freelancer to full-time, the research team was in our corner, really going to bat for us. And we were able to convert that freelance worker to full-time. And side note, that freelance worker was me. Another great thing to do with your allies is to grow mutual investment in each other. So you're not just doing work for them, but you can really bring them along and have them do work with you. So you're kind of giving them a peek behind the curtain to show them all the amazing work that you do and all the value that you're bringing. So this can be things like workshops, like a voice and tone workshop. It could be pair writing with your subject matter experts. So maybe that's on informational product content or FAQs where you can bring them in. It can even be as simple as asking them to review your work. That's going to kind of engender those good feelings. They know that their feedback is being heard and valued, but at the same time, you are again just sharing all the awesome work that you're doing to make their lives easier and make the experiences that you're working on better. Another method to kind of grow investment and participation with your team is to toot some horns and encourage participation along the way, and really encouraging people to think in a content-minded and content-first way. So a way that we've done this at Mastercard is by gamifying participation with our team. So we developed what we call the Content Cup, and people can earn merit badges and become champions of the content cause by embodying these content-minded behaviors. So for example, we have eagle eyes for people who spot a typo or an inconsistency. We have accessibility ace for people who are really championing accessibility and driving that forward. Word wizard for our designer partners or maybe product owners who really take the time to write their own content and make it awesome. And we even have meeting minder for people who remember to forward us a meeting invite. So this is a pan organization initiative, and people have been really excited to participate and earn these digital badges. And the sneaky part is that while we're doing this, we're also just growing awareness of our team and the work that we do. And we're really underscoring the need to have content-minded people everywhere, because by participating in this, people will see that when more people are thinking about these content behaviors and acting on them, the work gets better. So I've really been talking a lot about, sharing your work as much as possible. Another way to think about this is to imagine that you are the ice cream person and you are just handing out as many free samples of your work as you can, because only by sharing your awesome, amazing, valuable work will people see it. So a way that we've been able to do this at Mastercard without burning ourselves out is to implement what we call office hours. So this is where we'll meet with a team that doesn't have a dedicated content designer for maybe an hour or so a week. And we can kind of jump in and help them, maybe articulate a value proposition or work through a flow or help incorporate user feedback to something that they're working on. So it's bringing to them a large amount of value, but on our side, it can be a low commitment. So that's all very nice, but in the real world, when people want ice cream, they have to pay for it. So you'll find that as you're sharing your work, people are going to get a taste and they're going to want more. And here's where, you have to start saying no a little bit. You say, I would love to help, but myself and my team are fully dedicated already. But you're not just gonna, leave them hanging with no content support at all. You want to, tap into your network and let them know, hey, I don't have any more samples for you, but I do know a great content designer or another great content person that you could bring in and interview tomorrow. All right, so what did we learn about getting budget? You want to find your allies and give them a taste of what you can do, and then leave them wanting more. And finally, you want to make sure to recommend some new hires so you can bring in a new member to your team. On the flip side, while you've been busy hustling and working your connections on that personal level, you'll also need to share and prove your value. So this goes back to strategy. If you understand the goals of your business, then you know that every piece of content has a job to do beyond delivering information. So it might be there to guide, sell, influence, or fix problems for your users. And if you can impact these things, these are all going to tie back to your organization's bottom line. And when you can talk about your impact in terms of the bottom line, you'll find that your conversations around asking for headcount are going to go a lot easier. So I'm going to share just a few examples of ways that you can kind of track and measure your impact on the bottom line. What you decide to measure will really depend on your work and your organization's goals. But for example, here's kind of a famous example from Google where they were measuring, or their goal was to increase engagement on this hotel search ad. And they found that by updating the microcopy from book a room to check availability, they were able to increase engagement by 17%. And they did this by, first of all, setting a benchmark so they know before where they're starting, and then after measuring the number of clicks to see the click-through rate increase. You might have a goal that is a bit further down the sales funnel, so you could look at something like conversion, which you could measure through product signups. I love this example from HubSpot. They actually did an entire content-first redesign of their site. They knew from previous feedback that they were having some issues with people being overwhelmed by the amount of content on their site, not knowing where to go. So they really took a deep look and redesigned all their product information with a new visual hierarchy of their value proposition and how all these products work together. And in this redesign, by measuring the product signups before and after, they actually saw a 27% increase in product signups, which is pretty impressive. Okay, here's an example of something that I'm working on right now at Mastercard. It's a digital identity service, and it's also an example of how you can kind of track and measure your impact even when you're working on something that's not yet live. So for this digital identity service, we ask users to add their passport so they can use their digital identity places like an airport. But we knew that comprehension is going to be super important for a service like this, because if people don't understand how we're keeping their personal sensitive information safe, they're not going to want to use our product. So in our initial usability testing, we took this in with a kind of clean and simple screen to move users through the flow, but we saw that half of our participants in that usability testing had questions about security. So I took that as an opportunity to add in very clear calls to action around where they can learn more about their passport security, and adding in also some contextual information about how we keep their information secure. And when we did, again, through some iterative testing, finally taking this into a final test, we actually had 0 participants at the end of that asking questions around security. So that's a great win for content, because we know that when people better understand and trust our service, more people are going to use it, which is, of course, our business goal. So again, these are just a few examples, and what you test and measure is going to be personal to your work, but your conversation around that is going to be pretty similar to following this template. You want to say, here's the difference that content can make. However, as a solo practitioner or a small team, my capacity to make these differences is limited. Therefore, my impact is limited. So you kind of really want to dig in and say, what else could we improve if we had more people? What more money could we save or make if we had a bigger content team? So since you've been doing all the groundwork to get budget and show your value, it's probably time to start preparing for growth. And maybe saying it's time to start preparing for growth is a little misleading, because you should really always be preparing for growth. And if I can tell you one thing, it would be to always be asking for headcount, because it can take a really long time to go from getting the yes of approval for headcount to actually getting someone in their seat and working. So my best advice to you would be to start asking early and often. And going back to testing and measuring your content and sharing your impacts, you want to make sure that you're documenting all of those things. Every win you've had, every impact you've made, and then kind of take your show on the road and talk about it. So you can talk about it in your team meetings, in your department meetings. You can make your own meeting to talk about it. You can invite some of your awesome allies to come and talk with you about all the collaborative work that you've been doing. And this is, again, just going to share and show your value everywhere and start getting more teams primed to want to have a new content person come and join. And by doing these things, you'll find that you're really ready for onboarding, for the day one of your new hire, because you'll have evidence of all the decisions that you've made, which you can codify into things like style guides or terminology databases. And you'll have a history of what's been tested, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And you'll also have your crew of allies who will be ready and willing to help you onboard your new team member and have one-on-one conversations. So that's going to be a big help to get them up and running, and also a great time saver for you. So speaking of your new hire, who is that going to be? Because remember, we don't want this to be a one and done. You want to hire someone that's going to help you continue to grow. So a lot of people talk about finding a unicorn, but I say you should find a Pegasus, because it's like a unicorn, but I'm really interested in the wings, because you need someone who can help expand on your vision and bring it even higher. So really think about who is going to be the best wing person and messenger for your team. Because at the end of the day, you really want someone who's going to bring in new ideas, new insights, who has a different perspective that will make your team and practice stronger. So I'd really encourage you to intentionally pick people with different skill sets, the missing skill sets from your team, with different backgrounds, with different experiences. So I'm really talking about bringing in a diversity of candidates. And if your recruiters aren't bringing that to you, you should A, demand more of them, because that is their job. And then B, you can also create your own community, which is something we did at Mastercard around UX content design. And we actually did hire from that community. So excited for everyone to use these tactics and get your amazing new hire so you can keep growing in your current position and beyond. Thank you. And thanks, LavaCon, for having me. You can find me on Slack or Twitter or LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you. Stay on the channel for a second, Selene.
Sure.
I'd like to give you some of the feedback in the chat window. One person said, it seems like so much of being a UX person involves continually showing your value. So it makes sense to get into the habit of documenting the impact of your work. That applies to asking for headcount. It also applies for asking for a raise or a promotion at the end of the year. So document, document, document. And they said, this is excellent. Applause, applause, applause. And finally, I want to personally say congratulations on recently getting married.
Oh, thank you, Jack.
Okay, so